Hey guys, what's up? Wanted to come on here and actually wanted to do this last night, but I was a little tired, so I figured I'd do it today. But you guys might recognize this as the WCW or the WWE interpretation of the big gold belt. The originally the WCW championship before it went out of business. Now, they don't use this belt anymore unless they want to sell it and all that for profit. Like sell replicas, and which they do. Heck, they sell one with the NWO logo on it, or initials on it. But anyway, I wanted to come on here and talk about this championship, and mostly talk about something that Brian Zane brought up in his review he did last year. Last year, around this time, Brian Zane did a review of WCW Bash at the Beach, and Brian Zane, I will say this, was very generous when it came to this pay-per-view. Given with his rating. But the one thing a lot of people were looking forward to hearing him talk about, and probably fast forward to him talk about, was the situation that occurred in the middle of the show. You see, originally, the World Heavyweight Championship match was between Hulk Hogan and then champion Jeff Jarrett. Now I had watched the storyline play out. I was kind of going back and forth between Raw and Nitro, and sometimes SmackDown and Thunder, because of the fact that I was living on my own at the time, so I got to finally watch both shows. So anyway, long story short, I'm just fixing something there. Like I said, long story short, I did keep tabs on what was going on. The storyline was that Hogan was going to face Jarrett, but they didn't know what Hogan they were going to get until about a week before. And that's when we found out that Hogan decided to go back to the NWO Hollywood Hogan to kind of level the playing field when it came to the new blood, and mostly Jeff Jarrett. Well, everything looked like it was going according to plan. Basically, things were being set up to where it was being built upon in a decent kind of way, I would say, to possibly giving us a good matchup. That did not happen. What happened instead, Ed, was even though they were building this up throughout the night with Jarrett, bringing in this opera singer to stand by his side, and that was my dog just walking by, to sing when he beats Hogan, like I said, anything but that happened. Because what happened exactly was the fact that as soon as both participants got in the ring and the bell rang, basically, next thing I knew, along with everybody else that was watching this pay-per-view, next thing we knew, Jeff Jarrett laid down. Vince Russo took this belt, threw it in the ring, and said, "Hey, here, this is what it's about, right? This is what you want, right?" So Hogan, of course, got on the mic, called Russo out for what he was doing, saying that this is the reason the company's in the BS situation that it's in, pins Jarrett with his foot. Jarrett rolls out, and Hogan leaves as the new champ. Now, nobody knew exactly what was going on, and at the time, a lot of us were kind of conflicted by it. We started hearing about, this was at a time when a lot of us started to hear about shoots and real-life situations and stuff, but we weren't totally sure just yet what the scenario of what was going on, what the scope was. Well, following that, of course, we see Hogan leave backstage as soon as Vampiro was coming back from his match, which was a graveyard match. Later on after that, Russo gets in the ring and explains his side of the situation. Basically explains that instead of doing what was right for the business, and basically letting Jarrett go over, that would still make Hogan look strong in the end. Hogan said, no, that's not going to work. I want to go over. It's kind of complicated. I mean, even Brian Zane, when he was talking about it in his review, was admitted that he admitted it was complicated and confusing even for him to talk about. But basically, long story short, according to Russo, Hogan didn't want to do the right thing and put someone younger than him in Jarrett over to ensure a future in the business. That's essentially what it was. Hogan didn't want to put Jarrett over. And didn't want to put him over in a way that even Russo said that, from what I can understand, from what I can gather, would have helped Hogan come out looking strong even in defeat. But Hogan didn't want that to happen. So basically Vince Russo says, look, Hogan, yeah, he won the match, he won this, but guess what? It don't count. Because this belt from now on, the one he took, is the Hulk Hogan Memorial Belt, because he's out of here. He's done. Basically firing him on screen. Pulling a Paul Heyman, if you will. Because one thing Paul Heyman was always known for doing in ECW, when someone would fulfill their obligations to the company, is he would fire them on the spot. In front of an audience. Even if they weren't there. And that's what he did. And here's the thing. Russo defends the fact that Hogan and Bischoff knew he was going to go out and do what he did. He was going to go out, do the little work shoot, or legit shoot in this case, promo, and basically what was going to happen is exactly what occurred. And that was Booker T would become champion no matter what. Now, the scenario gets kind of convoluted after that. Because Bischoff and Hogan say that, yeah, it was supposed to go down the way it was him doing the whole work shoot promo, this is why the company's in the damn shape it's in kind of deal. Excuse my language, God. But the plan, according to what Hogan and Bischoff get behind, is Hogan was going to be gone for a while. There was going to be a tournament, and despite what version you believe, Hogan was supposed to come back and face the winner of that tournament to determine who was the undisputed world champion. There's another version going around that states that Hogan would have came back right before the finals, or just as the finals of the tournament to determine a new world champion was going to happen, specifically between two big heels. Hogan was supposed to come back before that match occurred, before the bell rang, I should say, before that match occurred, said, no dude, I've got the real deal. You guys are, what you guys are competing for, the false one, so if you really want this, why don't we make it a triple threat, or a three-way, or whatever they were going to do. So that's basically one of the two stories. Basically, according to Zane, from what he understands, originally Hogan was going to face whoever the champion was, as later on. Now, if you take it from the Russo perspective, that was going to be a heel, mostly probably Jeff Jarrett or maybe Scott Steiner or whoever, and he was going to face him at Halloween Havoc to determine or Starrcade to determine who the undisputed champion was. But from the one thing I've heard from the Bischoff Hogan side of things, from what I've heard and Zane's heard, but Zane didn't point this out, was according to Hogan and Bischoff, Hogan was supposed to come back, but he was supposed to come back before, like I said, the finals of the championship, basically before the finals of the championship tournament between two major heels, to where he would come in, show this, and basically through the argument like, hey, I won this, I'm still legitimately champion, you guys are just fighting for something that's not real, or not the real championship. And long story short, he was going to insert himself into the match, and it was going to become a triple threat. Or a three-way dance, however you look at it. You know. So basically, yeah. Long story. Basically, the common denominator I can get out of this was no matter what the situation, Hogan was supposed to come back and face come back and basically compete in a match to determine who the undisputed champion was. No matter whether or not it was against, I guess you could say, a temporary champion, an interim champion, or it was going to be against the two finalist heels in this matter of a world championship tournament. The overall consensus is Hogan was supposed to be part of that, I should say, no matter what. Now the question is, would Hogan gone over in the long run is the question. We don't know. There's a lot of different scenarios that could be put out there. Hogan was, there's a lot of ways people can look at it. That Hogan was supposed to, that again, even with Brian Zane, it's kind of confusing for myself, a fellow Brian, to talk about it. But the consensus that I can get is that Hogan was supposed to be part of this no matter what the situation was. But the overall consensus I do get, besides that, is I believe the outcome would have been Hogan putting over whoever was chosen to become the champ. So if it was champion against champion, then Hogan would have put over whoever the interim champion was to make them the undisputed champ. But if it was going to be Hogan inserting himself into the finals match against the two finalists of the championship tournament, the two heels that is, then it would have been one of those heels going over against Hogan. And then I would guess going the traditional Hogan route, I was just taking care of something there. The traditional Hogan route, that whoever would have gone over would have probably pinned Hogan, and Hogan may have endorsed them, may have shook their hands, and perhaps that would have started a babyface run for whoever that heel was. Whether that was a Scott Steiner, or a Jeff Jarrett, a Mike Awesome, a Lance Storm, because apparently that's the only other name I can think of. Because the fact that they were building up Lance Storm at this time, he's the only other name I can think of as potentially somebody that would have competed in the finals for this, or would have been in the position of the interim champion that would have faced Hogan, and Hogan would have put him over. That's my only guess. Again, I could be wrong, but in the long run, I'm trying not to make this video too long because a subject like this would cause it to go too long. The overall thing that I look at is Hogan was to play a role, was supposed to come back in either scenario, and from what I can tell, now they didn't mention this, Russo or Bischoff never mentioned this, but from what I can tell as a fan, this is my own personal perspective, from what I can tell, Hogan was going to put over whoever the interim champion was, or whoever one of the two finalists in the championship tournament was. And again, you could look at a peripheral of 4 different names that would have benefited. Jeff Jarrett, to make him truly the face of WCW at that time. Scott Steiner, to establish his continuing dominance that they were pushing him towards. Mike Awesome, to kind of make him the new babyface hero of WCW at that time. Or Lance Storm, to continue his mega push because he was winning all the mid-card belts, so it would only make sense for him to get this. And then by doing so, maybe that would slowly turn Lance into a babyface because that's how he entered. He entered as a babyface, then he went heel, and I'm guessing maybe if his name was probably being considered as one of those to go over Hogan in whatever scenario it would have been, he would have gone babyface. So my overall thought process is this, guys. No matter how you look at it, no matter who you believe, no matter how you look at it, the overall consensus, and from my own personal perspective and opinion, Hogan was supposed to be involved no matter what the scenario was or who you believe, and that in my own personal opinion and from my own personal perspective and opinion, Hogan was supposed to put whoever he was going to face, no matter what the scenario was, he was supposed to put that individual over as the new undisputed champion. Whether it was champion versus champion or him inserting himself into the finals match and making it a triple threat. So that's just my thought. That's just my opinion and my perspective on how I think it was going to play out originally in 2000 after the whole Bash at the Beach incident or situation at Bash at the Beach, before things got flipped on their head, behind the scenes, if you catch my drift. So, but that's just my personal perspective and opinion of how I see things, how I think things would have played out. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below. Comment if you like. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I'll talk to y'all later.